Hello.
That happen all the time in production, both with respect to input data set shift.
Are you blind or have you gotten glasses? Hi guys.
Hello.
So today is Edgar's birthday and Yvonne, so it's going to be a bit loud in the background. We'll just have to survive. Andrea is joining us to try to go through this whole demo day on the 12th, coming up very soon on Friday. And there's one thing I'd like to show you guys, unless you've already seen it on Twitter. But how is everyone?
Very good. I'm having brunch. So if you hear any chewing sounds in the background, it's me eating.
No, I just do this. And you're muted. These meetings are, imagine being able to do this at the dining table. You know, I have misophonia, right? So if I hear people eat, I go a bit crazy. So now we have almost 20 people for dinner. So sometimes I wish I could press the mute button. It's quite funny, Peter.
Only a matter of time.
Yeah, this is true. Are you all reading the, what's that sci-fi book we were recommended? The one about the AR future?
Which book? I missed it, obviously.
Oh, I think it was Brandel who pushed it. It's really good. It's gonna, I forget, it's upstairs. Right, okay.
And then last week's, I guess I'll check.
Yeah. Rainbow's Edge.
Oh, Werner Ving. Yeah.
Werner Ving. Okay, can I show you something? I'm kind of excited. That's supposed to be a yes. Is that a yes?
Yes.
Okay, just opening to documents here to make sure I'm showing you the right thing. What? Okay, yeah, that should be close enough. Right. So I have put this up on a page. You can see my screen, right? So I'm just going to show you the problem statement on the page. The problem statement is basically this. And this is specifically to do with our books on the future of text and our journal. This does not apply to everything. It just applies to a situation where there's just too damn much. So the first issue is, why does it have to be read front to back? That's not very useful. And how can we make it skimmable in different ways so you can find what you're looking for, right? So what I have done is, here is one of our transcripts from the Building a Thoughtful Conversation. It's 20,000 words. And then of course we have sorry, I just tore myself away from the table of everybody there. Anyway, no, actually I do have to do it properly. Shush. This is very strange. Here we go. Yeah, it's got a funny name. Okay, so this is a, oh no, that's the InDesign version. Oh, okay, doesn't matter. We'll do it this way. Here are 3 books on the future of text. You can see the 1924 and 48 megabytes, 48 being that size because of images, obviously. First one was the biggest in terms of text. So we're going to look at 1. So I've been experimenting a bit in just going to find a normal. Okay, so this is a relatively normal article. Here's a normal article. So I made a separate document and I call that rolling. So it's a completely separate document. So I went into this one and I took the name of the article and I put it in here. So what I've done from each article, like you can see, this is the first one, Adam Kampf. That's his name, that's the title, copied across. This thing is the first sentence or paragraph, depending on what made sense for the specific article. And this is the last sentence or paragraph, depending on what made sense. These middle ones are all human-made bullet points. I think maybe Fabian and Peter have seen some of this, but I don't think Alan has. But anyway, there's been some changes. So that's what I copied from here. So when I now export this, I'm going to export it with no cover, no table of contents. All of that stuff. Because there's a new wrinkle I think we could spend a few minutes discussing. Sorry, I have a slow hard drive connected. Right, okay, so you can all see this now, right? Alan, you can see, right? Okay, so because I can't see you for a minute. So here's the point, there's 2 points. Number one, when you go through now, no article is longer than a page. So you should be able to skim them quite quickly. And I found that having the human thing, the first sentence they wrote and the last really encapsulates it quite literally. And then the middle stuff with these bullet points says what it is. But here's the thing, if I now click on the number underneath Catherine Marshall, that's a citation. So if I now click again on this, on the title of the document it comes from, the first fugitive text, it opens it up on that page in that document. You're muted, I'm afraid.
When you say that document, do you mean it opens up the original document?
Yes, to the correct page.
Okay.
So that is why we make the assumption, or we make it explicitly clear that to use it like this, you must download these original documents, these special sessions, all the things that you would just have in your library. So these are then local links.
I love it.
Thank you, Alan Kay. And it's instant. Oh, Alan Kay has an issue. I'll fix it. Anyway, that actually shows something. If the cited document isn't found, it then does a web search. But so here's the 2 new things. One of them is I have this page here of suggested themes. So let's say someone is only interested in legal stuff. I couldn't imagine who. Select it, Command F, and it shows all the occurrences of that text. So because we have visual meta, it means you have the headings too, so you know who wrote it. You have a bit above and below. I've asked the guys if they can to remove the find that was originally selected as the basis for the find, because it's a bit noisy having that on top. But let's say someone is only interested in augmented reality. The problem with this approach is that augmented reality was not included in the summaries for some articles.
Yeah.
So this is why this kind of an approach should probably be used for the main document itself, where everything is in, or keywords. But then I got into the thing of, I showed this to a friend, and Fabian has just done something like this, and this is the new bit I need to discuss with you guys. Color coding. So the idea is one of 2 ways. Just want to check here. We have yeah, I think I did it here. So in this one, this was the one where you were in recently, Alan. What I've done is a different way of summary, because this is a chat transcript. So of course it's absolutely messy. So this is normal text. Actually, let's go to an Alan thing. Here we have an Alan thing, right? Actually, we'll go to a longer one.
Oh, look at that. Thanks.
Right. So what this is this thing is an AI generated summary of your bits. I tried to guess when we had lightning talks rather than just talks, because it wasn't that structured. But you can see here it is, and you can see it's the same typeface as the heading, as your name. That's because this is heading level 5. So in addition to the AI extracted bullet points, if I now fold this with a command minus, this is what it looks like. So all I've done is that heading level 5 and 6, which hardly anyone uses, I've reserved for this experiment. So that means you should now actually be able to read most of the substance of the article, of the transcript, just like this, right?
Fascinating. Yeah.
So the question for you guys is this approach, coloring words, because anybody can invent a new interaction as long as they assign a new keyboard or command or a button to it, but that gets complicated. So my question to you is, if we're going to experiment with color, twofold. Number one, how many colors? I think maybe just 3, unless they're a gradation like human body, human society. That's one question. And the second related question is, should it be shown when you're in this view? I could imagine under every heading, if there is any text that has a theme, a keyword, it'll show here, and you can get color going through the document. Or should it be when you go through like this, but you have to use a keyboard shortcut to toggle it on or off? Thank you for your patience. And any thoughts?
Yes. But I can wait, or I can go right now.
Go right now.
Okay. Just going in backwards order. No, actually, screw that. Okay. So what I love about what you showed about the sample, the snack size PDF, is that it is moving to not so much that the rolling, it's moving to something that I wholeheartedly believe, right? Which is that we're getting to a place where we can have a plurality of non-competing presentation modes, right? And so it's great to see that there's not like one way to get through this text, that it should be friendly and open. I think that's the summary example is one great example, and there might be 12 others, right? What I would love to see, even though I know this is not like possible in the immediate, but when you have the package and you say you have to download these other documents as well, right? In the spirit of a plurality of views, that would extend to a plurality of maybe interface styles, right? So just as much as you could imagine that people would want color, people might not want color, right? As other people might not want color. So in this case, I'm not saying that this is the only way it should work, but this is just maybe a setting or something where when you were going through the example of the rolling document, I would love to see, here's the rolling document, and I click on something, and then rather than jumping to the PDF that was downloaded, the link to it, it just pops out to the side, you know, it just moves over. So I can see it in connection to where I'm at, and I don't feel like I'm losing my place. That's one of the, just real quick, that's one of the problems I think a lot of times with PDFs or even with websites is this whole losing your place. And yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I completely disagree with you. And I mean, I agree with your principle.
I figured.
But so here's the thing. I did a long time ago for somebody the official website for the National Basketball Association, the American NBA in China. So we had a pop-up system based on hyperwords where you would select a player name or a team. You would get a thing come up and it would show you statistics about that player or team, which was really nice. And the person who wanted us to do the work, she was very much on make it light. Hi, Brandel. We're talking about things being connected to where they come from, but whether they're strong or not. So at this point, I don't think we disagree on Alan, but if you make something semi-transparent, all you're doing is making it harder to see, to read, obviously, right? So I
I
know
wasn't talking about transparent, but go ahead.
no, you were not. So I think we agree on this. So the thing is, when you have called forth something, it should be really comfortable. That's the extension of that. So if you look at the screen now, and I click on this number, and I click on to cite it, it happens to, depending on where it is on the screen, it'll slightly overlap or not. We don't really have control. But because they are two separate pieces, I would say you haven't lost the original.
Right. So can I jump into the nuance difference here? And Brandel, just to summarize, I love the rolling dock summarization that Frode just showed us. And the spirit of what I'm saying is a plurality of presentation modes, right? So I'm not debating that a lot of people would like the separate document to pop up and go straight to that deep link, right? But there might be other people who have different ways of taking in information who get discombobulated by too many tabs, right? And like me, for instance, if I would love to see is something as simple as a setting where, hey, I can either read this as one giant package where these other PDFs are invisible behind this summary view. They do not come into my conception. But if I click on something, it will be considered, part of the package. It's this bundle of PDFs, and I could just see it right there in the right-hand column, that part that refers to it, and then I can close it back up and get back to it. That's a small point, but the theme of it, the moral of the story is this, that there's no right way to read something, right? That what you're trying to do is give people more freedom to understand the periphery, to do synoptic reading or inspectional reading, however, right? And I think that there's a lot of great room to explore there.
Yeah. The need for exploration is crucial, and that's why I'm really so keen to show you this, guys, because what Fabian and Brendel are doing in a VR environment should hopefully connect with this. Because also, Brendel, there's the question of doing color coding of the text, which is, of course, a great idea, but hugely problematic once you start playing with it, because the human eye can't actually differentiate that many different colors unless they're next to each other. But what would, of course, be nice is to experiment around, like Alan and me fighting on this very productively. How should it come out? But in a way that it can relatively easily be taken into an XR environment, and these views have an identity there, not necessarily the same. But for instance, like this thing here that, yeah, Brendel, you saw it too, right? First sentence, last sentence from the document, and then bullet points. Whatever thing we end up doing, really important that we can share it amongst us in the same level of summarization or chopping or whatever, so that Alan and I can experiment with our two different views.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you're going to like this. What you're effectively sort of haggling over is building a browser of, like a browser in the most abstract sense of browsing a set of documents. I mean, it is sort of patently hypertext, but so much so that it's the kind of thing that one sort of normally thinks of and expects to be in a browser. And one thing that a browser has the benefit of is JavaScript and additional sort of actions and gestures being able to be sort of separately identifiable. And so, one thing that is definitely possible to do is build browser apps that can kind of live with and work over a payload of persistent document that you can have confidence in. Like, I think one of the things that you've sort of called back to a number of times in the past, Frode, that is absolutely valid, is the ephemerality of the state of the sources of documents that a browser is sort of working over, and that's absolutely true and absolutely deeply problematic. So like building a browsing convention out of PDFs does make sense in the context where those things can't be trusted. But it is interesting to think about how some of these things are sort of resolved in a context where that there are some of those capabilities and conventions already established. So, you know, the way that a mouse over results in a whole sort of panel of the first couple sentences within Wikipedia these days is a really interesting and constructive kind of reference point to consider for what these actions do.
Yes,
Yeah.
but there's a huge big but there, and that is, well, actually, there's at least two in addition to what you mentioned, and one of them is it's really slow, and speed matters when you're navigating. So, you know, I had the misquote here with the Alan Kay one. So if I click on that now, it goes to the DOI, and now I would have to download it if document. But even if it's on a web page, I mean, you know, here's the good old Facebook. You know, when you click through, there is enough of a cognitive load that, yeah, maybe not. But if you click through on a local link, it's instant. And I think the fact that it is instant means that we don't need tabs as much to go back to something before you entered Brendel, because dismiss it, bring it back. It's near zero effort. So we don't need
it's not. Go ahead.
No, that was it. I was just going to mumble around it.
Okay, I'll just say the point that I was making is not even like a haggling point. It's just an opinion, and it seems like a very small thing. But if you look at it from the perspective of the job to be done, right? For me, when I'm going through a PDF and I'm trying to explore around, or if I want to click on a link, I don't want to move to a new document in a sort of heuristic way of thinking, because I'm still doing the job of the first PDF, right? So I'd like to know kind of what's this extra bit of information, what's this errata? But in that case, in the case of the sample, the rolling document, or the summarization, I should say, it's potentially just the summary and no access to all the other documents, which I think is great. But in that example, if I wanted to click on a link, then sometimes I do want to move to that link and switch my job to be done from summary to actually like, let's really dig into this. But other times I just want to say like, I want to learn a little bit more, you know, and then I want to get back to my initial job, which is summary. It's not even a haggling point. It's just a interesting observation.
No, Alan, it's a really important point, and I'm very glad you're bringing it up, because I think of this as being precursor to being in a VR environment. And just the fact that we have more space in a VR environment won't solve these issues. So I think this is really, really important. So I think we're haggling, but in a fun and useful way, because, you know, here I open it again. On a good size monitor like this one, it's not as much of a problem. On a laptop, of course, things overlap and take more space. It's a different issue. But when it did come up, it is a separate thing. So it is not that far away from your slight overlap thing. But my final point, and this is really important, I would like to see what you think on this. It's like a mess on a table. The user made that happen. So the user made this extra thing, so the user has the control to get rid of it. You know, so I'm thinking that as long as you have the control to bring forth and move back, then it becomes a different thing. But if you feel that the action you do is a bit controlling you rather than you control it, and you have to wait and it's cumbersome, it's a completely different weight.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with that, Frode. And I don't know how much you've played. And what I would say is that it's a function of the degree of nuance and control that a user is responsible for with regard to the sort of construction and arrangement of those artifacts. I don't know if you've used multi-window Safari, not Safari, Quest browser, but like the window management in Quest is really is pretty heavy-handed. You know, because it's got the like, I don't know, does Quest Pro have just the cylinder of documents around you, or do you have the ability to arbitrarily arrange things multiply in space?
You're talking about the MetaQuest.
Yeah, the MetaQuest browser. Like,
What's that,
It's
Fabian?
just the cylinder, right?
Yeah, Fabian is nodding. Yeah, I couldn't remember.
Yeah. Oh, so I wasn't sure whether Quest Pro also has it, but you've got one too, right, Fabian? So I would say that's. I don't know that they'll continue to stick to that in the future, to be honest, because what you're saying, Frode, about it's like, sure, it's a mess, but it's my mess, is absolutely critical for your ability to sort of render the sort of the positionality and the orientation of documents sort of legible and reasonable. And so, to some end, it's good to make sure that you don't have fully arbitrary sort of orientation and orientability of things, so that you end up with sort of sticking documents halfway into the page, into a surface and stuff like that. But I do think that it would be, because you don't have the ability to have overlapping windows. You don't have the ability to be able to kind of create sort of effective stacks of web pages, and I think that would be really transformative. So, yeah.
Because
I'll quickly say just like kind of where that opinion of mine came from. It was in part, I was really impressed with the export, the granularity of the export functions you had in there, Frode, where you're saying, I don't want to have the table of contents. I don't want to have, these other aspects. I just want X, right? And that is the right direction to go in. And it's kind of like that kind of customizability could apply to exports, but it could also apply to interface.
But I think you're right. And the reason I think this point is so important to fight over, again, productively fight, is that, I'm sure you've all also been reading more rumors of the upcoming Apple headset. And display-wise, if the rumors are true, it look absolutely insanely phenomenal. Just visually, it'll be a game changer. But one thing is, once you have more space, like I love working on my bigger screen, it's new to me, it can easily get more messy. So what Brandel highlighted is so important. We need to give the right level of freedom. Otherwise, it's going to be just a big bundle of messes. So that's why the whole, when do you encourage clicking through, going back, and also I would really like for all of us to collaborate on, so I did the entire first book manually myself. It took forever, and I'm not good with detail work. But if this turns out to be wrong, that'll be one of the greatest days of my life. If we can together come up with a better way of doing it. It's just, I feel that, and I know we all agree, real data is entirely different than talking about information in general. So this is a real data thing. So it's so important. And similarly, the thing, I showed this to a friend, she was so impressed. And then I showed her a little thought of having color, and immediately she got excited. So I'm going through the color thing again. It's probably not going to be as useful as we thought. But here's the thing, we've had a wonderful weekend. Today's Edgar's birthday. If you want to, you can sing to him later. And, we went to the coronation this weekend. It's been absolutely amazing. I'll tell you stories another time. But what has really been weighing on me is that text is horrible for overview. Really, really horrible for overview. So the kind of things that Brandel did in the early days of our community of making this magic carpet, we have to figure out ways to get to that. Color might be a way to do that. A different kind of chunking might be a way to do that. But if we don't figure out a way to make text more overviewable, how in the world can we encourage people to look at large corpuses of text without just having AI summarize it and give them some nonsense?
Yeah, I think one of the things that stands a chance of answering that question is going back to motivation and the modalities that people expect to have as a result of what it is they really intend to do with the document. And it's tricky because we have this sort of nominal neutrality of a lot of the documents and the mechanisms for creating documents that we work with today. So Microsoft Word doesn't seem like it's opinionated, and Mozilla Firefox and Google Chrome don't seem like they're opinionated about what they're doing, but they really do bias people in favor of certain actions in certain modes. And the same goes for phone browsers versus desktop browsers. And it's really worth sort of scrutinizing those in a moment and at a time when we have the ability to create and imagine alternatives, especially as you say, with pixels around you, having Quest Pro and other things sort of on the horizon that, like, you know, it sounds like Quest 3 is going to come out this year. That have the ability to kind of manifestly reimagine what it is that a browser and browsing is as a consequence. Nobody's really talked much about that, and yeah, it's really interesting that Quest browser is so limiting. Like, I know I've got it, I use it most days, but I hadn't thought about the fact that they haven't provided any real additional benefit insofar as it sort of allows you to arrange documents based on what it is that you need to make of with sense of those things. So there's even if somebody does nothing else, then just having an arbitrarily arrangeable set of 2D panels would be a meaningful innovation to be able to kind of play with and think about with.
Agreed. Wow. There's going to be so much that changes so quickly. A quick thought on the color, because I like that approach. And again, I think it's the kind of thing that should be maybe it would be, I'll put it this way. Conventionally, color is used as a kind of top-down decision, right? Made by the publisher, right? And you don't have a choice in the colors or whatever. And we're not in that situation anymore. The text, the link that I just provided about visualizing neural net machine translations is a good example of simple color to indicate, different actions, right? And that could be done in that's essentially what you've got here with the glossary and the colors. But when I look at it, I kind of think it in a slightly different way, and this is what I want to try and present, is that colors could be determined by an arbitrary boundary of either the point you're trying to make or the article or the entire book, right? And if colors are distinguished by, like, here are different parts of this argument, and so I'm going to give them different colors, but it's only going to last for a few pages, right? Or I'm going to search for a couple of things, and falling naturally out of that search for a couple of things, those things are going to be given different colors, and I'll be able to see them, how close they are together, how far apart they are, and how they relate to each other. And this, of course, that you're looking at is just something powerful about just red and black. Has always worked really well. Anyway.
I think that's very, 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 very cool. And, this is an example of you bringing a complete out of left field perspective, because this is what I had so far, right? Human stuff, greenish. But as we talked about a little while ago, we can't, differentiating between technology and knowledge work, unless you're seeing them on the same page, you probably wouldn't be able to do. And I think that's okay. So if, let's say, in our community for our book, we decided on a vocabulary for themes and colors and applied it to our book, that could be cool. But what I thought about is, I don't have a lot of money left to spend on programming, which is good, because then we have to be a bit more thoughtful. And also, we certainly don't want users to have to think a lot. These things should just make sense, right? So maybe instead of making this in this heavy-handed way, I built like a basic interface here in Reader, where a person can assign a title, color, and keywords themselves, so it would work on any document. Maybe instead, it should be a find function. So you set up for yourself, like, it's the IKEA principle. You make it yourself, you're going to feel it's more yours, right? So when you do a Command F or similar, you have a few pre-made searches, maybe one for legal, one for arts, etc. And it does that for you in the color coding, so that you choose yourself when reading where to apply it. I don't know where these things might fit. I don't know, because if color is going to be useful, it's going to have to be consistent over time, I think, which is the opposite of what you said, Alan, which is what's so interesting. So you always think of human stuff as greenish, technology as reddish, or whatever it might be.
Well,
where might it fit?
the difference there again is going back to the frame of the user, right? Where colors are not consistent across all the various things that they're reading. You know, if they had their own personal browser, their own goggles, and they were able to say, okay, everything that has to do with digital humanities, I want to be green, then that would be great, right? But all these books have different rules, right?
No, but the reader software could do exactly that. The thought here is in Reader, you would set this up, and I would want this to be something that would go in Visual Meta, because imagine reading this stuff and getting used to it, and then finally Apple's headset comes out, Fabien's world has changed, he can import these colors, so in a VR environment you can have this amazing tapestry of colors that you know that you've decided. So whether you're in this or that environment, red is red is red, and it means the same thing.
There's a big question I have, and this kind of rolls around the entirety of computing, is the tension between keeping momentary views sort of maximally differentiable insofar as you use all of the available channels like color or shape or whatever, or layout, and the sort of cognitive benefits of persistence of attributes. So if you have a rainbow of, if you have a 360 degree of hues that you have available, what is the practical benefit of coloring all of the things in this section as differentiably? So like science and technology is blue, humanities is red, sort of nature and ecology is green. If then somebody's going to go into a sub menu where all of those things are where everything is green after that, you know, because there would be a temptation then to reuse color in a way that that you may not have the ability to coordinate between the two things. Go ahead, Rhoda.
That's a really important point, but you know, I come from an arts background. To me, color is problematic because it's very strong. So if I'm going to make software, color will be used for navigation, but you have to be able to toggle it off. Right? I mean,
Yeah, that's fair.
not everybody would agree with that, but I mean, here's on this page that Alan sent, here's a great example of colors being used. Of course, Siena and Padua are the same, but that's because it's just in this. You know, here it helps give a feeling, and when then you go in, addressing your point, maybe you click here on, let's say, I can't pronounce his name, Donatello, because obviously Teenage Mutant. Click on this. Maybe you go in on that and the heading is blue, but the rest of it is not, or not even anything relationship. But yes, it goes back to even typography. Who chooses the font, the reader or the author?
Yeah, a topic for another time perhaps, but I've been thinking some about AI and UX. And rather than thinking along the lines of, oh, what's possible outside of the text box, right? Trying to think more about, okay, what does this actually mean for our interfaces? And one of the areas that I'm exploring or trying to wrap my head around is that the design, but we've been living most of our lives in a UI paradigm, right? That's design patterns, frameworks, you know, here's a header, here's the content in the body, and here's all, you know, Bootstrap and Tailwind and everything like that. These are all frameworks built around best practices for designing websites or apps. And those principles came about not just because they are the most readable or comprehensible, but also because they're the most scalable, right? Like a tooltip works because it can handle a large variety of content. Modal can handle even more variety, right? If we're getting into a world of AI, could it not create interfaces on the fly? And if so, could they be blended in with the content itself, so we would see totally different principles, given that scale would no longer, or a solution that needs to be scalable that fits any kind of content would no longer be a necessary constraint. Would that wind up creating different kinds of interfaces? Anyway, topic for another time, but I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on it because it may just be nuts.
Yeah, well, to answer that, I would say that like what we have today in terms of the presentation of writing is a function of all of the different boilings down of the sort of technological underpinning of the way that we do writing and the way that we do the reading of writing by consequence. And so when we had written text as the primary sort of mode of like scribed text as the primary mode, then there were a lot of things that were available as a consequence of that in terms of the intensity of writing and the characteristics of individual sort of book hands and things. And to your exact point, like one thing that scribes tended to do as a consequence of sort of responding to the necessities of scale was to normalize. And Charlemagne was responsible for so much of that in terms of mandating a specific book hand in order to make sure that everybody within the empire had the ability to read each other's kind of resources. And so the sort of uniformity of that was considered to be more important than the individual expressivity from moment to moment. But I'm sure that there would have been instances where people had the ability to kind of innovate and flourish. And certainly in personal communications, that would have been much more important as well. But, you know, we took that into the printing press, movable offset typing, printing, and we had, you know, the necessity to vastly reduce the number of glyphs that we were using. And so that got thrown away. And so we were writing and we had to standardize all of the components of it from the type. And so some people have used italics, some people have had to use different flourishes like underlining or adding additional or red lettering afterward and things like that for the benefit of being able to kind of construct different. I'll look for that, Alan. Because it's fascinating. Charlemagne minuscule, was it? No. Anyway,
Minuscule,
Carolingian minuscule. Yeah, Carolingian's the name of it when it's in that sense. But it was Charlemagne who did it in like the 700s or so, I think. But yeah, so those things were standardized, and then so we had paper, and we had all of the different pages, the sort of the scanability, glanceability that comes from that. But then, you know, in the 20th century, once we had started reading on screen-based displays, we lost the context. So you know, people talk about focus plus context, and largely, especially on the initial lower DPI displays and things, we only had the context that could be afforded by a single screen's worth, and there wasn't the overhead of showing sort of broader contextual representation of a given body of text meant that we could only really stand to spare something as little as a scroll bar for the benefit of kind of explaining where we are in the overall sort of location of a document. So we've lost a tremendous amount because of the various sort of moments for extreme parsimony within textual and informational representation. And I'm not saying that we have to throw over all of that stuff away, but we've got to recognize the moment of plenty that we're in. That was long. You go ahead.
No, that was perfect. And you brought up the scroll bar before. And what scared me last year was that we're about to get a new scroll bar. In the VR environment, Apple, who know how to do this stuff for the introduction, you know, they will introduce an equivalent. You know, like we've talked about, where do you locate a document in space and its elements? Are they relative to your head, to the room, to the document, to the desk? All of these questions, they will have to have resolved. Maybe not the best way, but at least...
Sorry, I would love to work on that. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, me too. But here's the thing. Okay, so the coronation yesterday, yesterday was the coronation concert. It was okay. Some of the visuals are amazing, worth watching in the background. But Stella McCartney, of all people, she was doing an introduction about taking care of the environment, which was amazing. And then the king himself, in a pre-recorded speech, he said, he's talking about the future of our planet. And he said something really key. It is purely through our actions that it will go well or not well. He said it better, but it is purely through our actions, he said. It's just basically a big fuck you to everyone in the audience. Like, this is not a someone else problem, to use Mark Anderson language. So Alan, we are working on this. Yes, you could say that we are, other than one person who shall not be named who work for a big Apple company, in a way we're nobodies. Of course we are. But if we can't do these experiments before we get brainwashed, if we can't put it in a form that's readable, and that's why I'm stressing over themes and stuff, we may have a little bit of a say.
Yeah, I mean, I would say also, like, I'm not sure who you're talking about in terms of not being named, but like the reality is
That's
that
you, Brandl. I'm not naming you.
I know. None of the thinking here is that expensive, and a lot of, you'd be surprised by the conservatism of in a lot of big technology companies, as evidenced by Meta and the fact that the modalities that are on offer, like, I actually do know the Meta folks who are building the browser, and they're really lovely people. But it takes thinking about these things in all sorts of directions, and the sort of the conventions that can emerge from anywhere, as long as they're well argued and have benefits that flow from them. So even if there were companies doing things, like, it's possible to innovate based on sort of a fresh perspective on what all of those things are for, because new media are for everything. I don't know who. There was a team inside Apple working on CSS and things like that for the benefit of iPhone, but I'm sure a lot of the things that turned into what web pages and other apps happen to do on iPhone these days didn't come from inside Apple. And so, even if Meta or Google or Microsoft sort of does these things incredibly well, there will be a number of places where, like, the thinking about how to array and align those capabilities behind a certain task have to be constructed, hewn out of other people's innovations.
Yeah, it's funny on that note. I was telling my dad about the future of text, and he was like, PDFs, that's kind of boring. I was like, well, no, I mean, there's actually a lot. There's a lot going on there. That it does seem boring, but there's more to it than you may think. And then I was like, but they also talk about VR, and he's like, oh, okay, that's cool. It's like, well, okay, it's not that. But quick note, and this is maybe even another. Well, it is another topic, but in the way that we can't ever really accurately predict the future, right? Things always take these swerves that we don't expect. He is a cool dad. Actually, you know what I found out? When I went down to the South to go see my family and stuff, and I found out that my dad knew Grace Hopper. Yeah.
I need to see you so I can touch you.
Yeah, wow. It was amazing. He was one of the early programmers who learned the IBM mainframe and everything, and so he had a community much like this in Louisiana, and he brought together speakers and everything. And Grace Hopper was like 90 at the time, but she came and spoke, and he got to talk with her. And so, yeah, pretty wild. I'll tell you about my dad some other time. He's done some amazing stuff, but not on the internet at all. Point is, yes. The other topic was, I was writing about ebooks and how much I want a different kind of ebook, right? As we talk about here. And then it's interesting to think of ebooks as a kind of alternate internet, like an alternate timeline internet. It's how the internet could have been, which is way worse in a lot of ways, but it's better in some ways in that, say, for instance, things don't change as quickly. You get a document. You don't get it bulleted or whatever with ads.
Intertwinkled.
Yeah, right. Or riddled with ads, right? or JavaScript, you have this very gate-kept format, right? And we imagine VR as being just an extension of the internet, but it may swerve in different directions that we think it may become when you combine, say, AI. Maybe that suddenly swings the initiatives, the incentives to being like, I would rather have something that is authenticated as being true and without hallucination. And if that means I have to take it in a package format, I will, right? And a VR internet could actually be more like an ebook internet than the one we currently have. I don't really have a better way to explain that yet, but that's noodling around. I'd love to get y'all's thoughts.
That's really productive as a starting point.
So
Yeah, more thoughts, please.
yeah, I want to talk about my dad now.
Okay.
My philosophy was, when I started this, was all about liquid information. He said, shouldn't information be solid so you don't lose it? Shouldn't it be secure? It's like, yeah, but, you know, so it's also that kind of influence. And that is, of course, there's two reasons I like PDFs, many more reasons why I hate them, but two reasons. One is that is what academia uses, period. Number two, it is solid. It will remain forever. But hopefully through the, you know, visual meta and whatnot, the viewing, like we've been talking about so much today, the viewing should be up to whatever you want it to be. But that can only happen if we have the right metadata and the right understanding of each other's way of doing that. Before I pass the baton to Fabienne, who's hardly spoken, just reminding you guys, in a few minutes, we'll start talking to Andrea. I think she's joining us on demo day. But look, here's my favorite son. And this is last night. He got, for one of his friends, he got Lego. So he's finally starting playing with Lego. I was very proud of him. He didn't want to do anything else other than properly do Lego. And of course, Lego bricks are a perfect analogy for what we're talking about, isn't it? You know, so someone is going to define the size of the holes and the buttons and the things. And I'm just desperately hoping it'll be either clever people or us. Not to say you weren't clever. Fabienne, over to you.
Yeah, the Lego bricks always work for me. I mean, I think it's all about composability. But for the analogy about files, I don't want to dig too deep into this, but last week I was offline, and that was quite fun. But I still did all my nerdy and geeky things, because the idea was to be offline, but still do VR, still, you know, I have my Steam Deck that I mostly use to program, actually, not to play games, but from time to time I do play games on it. But in terms of having things not liquid, I bought, well, I also had my little Raspberry Pi as hotspot. All the stuff was connected together. I'll present a bit more that work specifically another time, because I think it is valuable. But for this, for the developer, especially in the audience, what scared me for going offline was indeed, if I don't have some specific files, I'm basically screwed. If I don't have some specific packages, yeah, I just can't work. And harder than this, it's not Wikipedia, it's Stack Overflow. Like a lot of the time, I'm like, oh, I don't know how to do that basic thing. I'm going to ask the internet. And what I learned during that week, or actually right before that week, is you can download Wikipedia. You can download Stack Overflow. There are a lot of things like this, and it's actually easy. You don't have to fetch page by page yourself. And then to, let's say, celebrate this, I bought micro SD of 512 gigabytes for nothing, or very
Insane,
cheap.
isn't it?
It is ridiculous. So just for, again, that's the size, and the cost is like 60 euros. So I'm not saying it's nothing, but it's it's not a lot. It fits in my wallet. It has no weight, like maybe it has like a couple of grams of weight. But what did I put in it? I put Wikipedia, again, the whole thing, 100 gigabytes or so. I put Stack Overflow, which has not all, but a bunch of questions for developers, 100 gigabytes also, and a couple of other things. But it's just ridiculous. Like, it's not the world's knowledge, but a significant part of it. There is no AI involved in there. You could still put models in it, but in
Right.
that thing that fits in your, not your backpack, in your wallet, you put
I mean,
all
that's
that-
your assistant. Essentially, you get a federated model in there. That's fantastic. That's
yeah.
the future of text.
So I don't want to dig too deep in the implementation itself, but indeed on the Raspberry Pi, put a little node program, which I built on the spot, and it was peer-to-peer, because if that node is gone, I want another one to be the relay for it, an interface that is responsive, that works in the VR headset, because it doesn't have to be like, no interface. It can be text and programmable, and the blocks, and also literally the one that you grab with your hands in VR. But yeah, the whole point of this, which I will happily develop another time, was you can actually get ridiculous amount of actual files, even if the internet is down. Like, I don't want that, but if now the connection stops for whatever technical reason, the internet is super resilient by design, but still, if it stops, I have my little survival kit, my prepper of data, and both in terms of information that is just academic or Wikipedia in that sense, but also stuff related to development. It's just ridiculous what we can put as safe, but it's still like that's not how I usually use my data. I have it as an actual backup, but let's say 99.9% of the time when I'm not going offline, which I still do recommend to everyone to do when they can, online works pretty well. But it shouldn't be just one. It should be online with responsive, both in design, in development, and access to the data.
That's a really important thing. Of I guess a lot of sci-fi people expected that, like Rainbow's End. They do a lot of their stuff, close to their chest, as they say. And thank you, Brandl, for making us read it. Just on a reflection of that, and this is not to change the subject. When you watch a movie and someone has an Apple Watch, if you see the display is off, it immediately dates it. When you have an Apple Watch where the display is always on, it changes what the device is. And same with the phones. I've only had it for a couple of weeks now, maybe a month, but it's an always on display. It changes what the phone is for me. It becomes glanceable. By the way, I was the first person in the world to use that word on the web. I checked, in the sense we use it now. So here's the thing. We used to have screensavers. We don't really have them anymore, right? But for a lot of what we're building here, why not, let's say within a few years, we expect that our VR environment will be our main workspace because it's bigger, right? Why not develop some kind of a screensaver? Yeah, exactly, up on there as well. But what about on our normal computer, a screensaver that is a window into our VR office? So let's say let's pretend we're all working together at the same time. You walk past your computer, you're not working on it. What do you see? I see the avatar of Fabian sitting hunched over his computer or whatever it might be. It's really interesting how not hunched over, that was a cartoon sense, not a physical sense. It's really interesting how the screen that isn't being looked at has been ignored for the ambient experience of it. Right, so we're talking about distances, like you're talking about taking all the data to you in a form, and now we've closed the window as well. Anyway, weird.
I think the development of local copies for the purposes of navigability is phenomenally important. One of the things that, like what you were saying, Fabian, about the reality of simply being offline is something that I've butted up against in the past when I've been trying to do programming of various kinds, and I like to play with Three.js, and I know quite a lot about Three.js, but I don't know all of it, and some of it is hard to know just because it's just memory. It's not that it makes sense. No offense to Ricardo, but it's just like you need to know the order of the things, or you need to know which things to import and stuff like that. And if you don't have onlineness, if you don't have the ability to reach back to the docs or examples, there's no way to know. And so all you can do is use whatever resources and references that you have on hand. and there's no way to go further. And so that like the benefits of being offline are, like you've said, like everybody said, are legion in terms of focus and direction. But
Sorry,
there's
just
such a
1 minute.
go ahead. Oh, it's going. But the wall between stuff that you have available and stuff that you don't is infinite in terms of like it's simply unreachable. You can't get to it. But at the same time, like onlineness has this intrinsic precarity in terms of the level of quality that you can guarantee of being able to access things, and adversarial relationships between ad banners and multiple kind of different sites jockeying for your attention and things like that. So like there's a real sort of existential challenge to the reliability regarding the sort of reliability and control of information as navigated to on the internet over the web. And something that's been really fascinating for me as I've become kind of more closely involved with web standards and specifications is realizing like the incentive structures there are so often at odds with individual users and what their personal goals might be. And it's not simply a matter of going like, oh, well, let's just enforce greater mandatory alignment with user goals, because the reality is that people need to be paid. The reality is that the provision of content is sometimes premised on some slightly conflicted goals. New York Times, I'm looking at you. And so it's a challenge to figure out like where to sort of draw those lines and which modalities we have the ability to kind of we have the ability to kind of align behind, and whether there are sort of a multiplicity of mechanisms and modes that people can connect to these bodies of information with. And I think local overrides, like of the kind that you had there, Fabian, are really interesting, where if you have a pre-cached version of the entirety of Wikipedia, you can refer to that with a sort of certainty and guarantees, and similar with other sort of resources and apps.
Yeah, I think the biggest I don't know if it's I don't want to talk too much about it now because I actually have to think it through, but indeed it's the, let's say, local cache, the resilience. Like I don't want things to go bad or in any way for the infrastructure. Our ability to communicate, the liveness indeed is extremely valuable. But if it does, I feel okay with that, and it's something I want other people, of course, to experience, and it's something that I think should be pervasive, that every time we do have indeed some online aspect, it should not be the only way, and then maybe providing a local cache from the start is the way. Maybe there is something else I don't know yet, but it provides some kind of resilience is the result, but serenity, I would say. And I'm sure we all experienced that, where the connection is kind of working, but not really. And it's this in-between state that is really hard to manage. So I think having indeed the cache first, and then checking and having the right mechanisms that don't seem so complex, but indeed that might be against the incentive of others that want for just financial gain and always on connection with always piped to whatever data pulled and pushed. But I think it's just makes us more resilient. And for the non-ability even to connect and have access to the data in the first place, another thing that I think was extremely valuable to me, and it's not technical, it's just letting go of the right way, and it's again like whatever works, and you might be completely off the normal path and might be inefficient, but if you focus on like what is my actual goal there, what's the point of the process I'm undertaking, and then it opens up actually a lot of new possibilities, and what you can learn in the process is also extremely valuable. So I think it goes a long way beyond just the technical solutions.
Yeah, and something that it just reveals to me is that there are like the default mode of browsing and the default mode of having a pre-selected sort of intentionally identified set of local files are two very different and fairly extreme modes of sort of navigating information, but by no means need to be considered the only ones. We're just talking, Andrea, about the inherent sort of precarities of different modes of information navigation. Having a pre-selected set of PDFs on your own computer is one thing that you have guarantees over, but there's a hard-edged sort of limit to the availability of material because you've only got what you've got. Whereas in a browser on the internet, you have potentially everything, but the service is patchy, and there are a number of people trying to get at your eyeballs for the benefit of advertising, and they're sort of equal but differently fraught in terms of why you might sort of use one versus the other, and the practical consequences for what kinds of things that you actually do, and what the medium says you want to do with it. Fabian downloaded Wikipedia to not even a thumb drive, but a micro SD card. That little guy, and all of Stack Overflow for the purposes of his prototyping, and just the manifest change that it has on what you have the ability to kind of reach for in a given moment.
And for the anecdote also, so I it did force. I think it's really an interesting process and worthwhile to experience, not just talk about, because I think it's a little bit like an extension of if you are stuck in the subway or for a really short period of time, you're stuck with your thoughts, and you have to be creative. Otherwise, you're just bored. But there, if you do it with all your gadgets still. The example was I brought the Quest 2 with me, and beyond just the micro SD with Wikipedia and Stack Overflow, I remembered that I had downloaded alpaca.cpp, which is a large language model, and I put it on the Quest because I wanted to see just if it was able to run, which mostly does. But then I was able to, again, being offline in the completely lost countryside of Belgium, I was able to run that large language model also, because I was able to search through the different files I had in my network of devices. And I was able to not just ask, like I was able to ask questions about how to build an HTTPS server using Node.js, and it was a kind of, conversational manner. And again, all offline and forcing me to scavenge through my little pieces of data and programs that are all across the different devices. So again, that process, some kind of data and software scavenging, do the most of whatever you have there, was also quite valuable instead of like yet another time reaching for something new.
Sorry, I had to step out, unavoidable. Are we ready to switch over to talking about Demo Day? Demo Day. Okay, so I've taken the wise words of Fabian, and we'll go through this in a minute, I guess, but maybe we should just talk a little bit about our feelings for what Demo Day should be. And then we will draft this invitation, which is also the program together. Is that cool? Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So first of all, it will be European time. So that'll be tricky, but we've discussed that. Secondly, actually, no, not secondly. Andrea, why don't you introduce your perspective since we have Fabian's word, so that'll be like a balance or something.
So I think I have some questions or things we should kind of align on. So the first thing is, are we going to send an invite to everyone? Like, are we going to tell people on social media, hey, this is what you're doing if you're interested at the intersection of text and immersive space? Join us either as a participant or as a spectator. Because I do think, text is discussed a lot in in AR and VR circles. It's like one of the main UX headaches that we have. So it could potentially be interesting to other people. So that's the first question that I have. Because I think for me, that kind of changes things quite a bit. If it's like, so is this an internal thing, or is this an internal thing plus guests, would be the first uncertainty I have in my mind.
It's funny because text so far has been something everybody uses, but no one is interested in. And now suddenly because of AR, AI, as you said, suddenly everybody's interested in it, but not for text's sake, as a medium to get stuff. So I don't think we should necessarily put it on social media, but I do think we should email our community. And if there's someone specifically we want to join, do that. I think this will be slightly determined by what degree of demo or making we're expecting to have happen on the day, though. What's your thinking on that? I mean, ideally, it'll be a proper making day rather than chatting day. One of the rules that some of you haven't seen is no slides. So what do you think about that? How far should we engage the community, or how much?
I'm okay with either way. I think some people might come, but only if we make a big deal out of it on social media. If we choose not to, that's fine with me, and we don't, and then we just post the recording. But that's going to change things quite a lot, because if it's just going to be like 4 of us, that's perfectly fine with me. Then we have a more kind of intense workshop kind of thing. It would be more like, you know, like a regular call. It's just that we show things to each other by screen share.
Just going to check on my developer thing. To answer the question, Alan's question, Andrea, do you mind addressing what is the demo for? Because I'd love your perspective on that. Maybe we're not even completely on that.
Right. So for me, I still have in my head what I proposed last time, which is giving everyone a paragraph. It can be whatever, a paragraph from literature, a poem, a paragraph from an academic paper, and parsing through that using some kind of VR or AR, some kind of immersive piece of technology, and using that paragraph first to see, to kind of start to put our finger on the intersection between how would our brains start to tease out important information out of that paragraph, and where does immersive space come in helping us tease out those layers of information and maybe transform them somehow. And I think the start point is really this idea of the hypertext, right? That Freud has so many different versions and takes on that. So there is either a whole sentence in that paragraph, or a word, or a letter, or the whole paragraph that has some sort of other kind of meaning attached to it that you might want to access. So does space come into play at all in how we can tackle this question? I mean, I think that's kind of my personal interest in this group and this kind of discussion, because I know a lot of people who would say, actually, no, space, like what does space have to do with hypertext, you know? And like, where is there even an intersection to talk about? So is there any kind of cognitive proposition that have to do with embodied immersive space that can intersect with our conversations about text, memory, hypertext, brainstorming, whatever, all this other stuff? And I think I would like to propose my answer to what that cognitive proposition might be, but I think there are many other directions. including positions that say, no, all of this is not relevant. So I would be very interested also in people arguing against my argument. And that might potentially spin into a whole conversation about, okay, maybe Andrea's brain finds this useful, but no other brain does, which is also a good conversation to have. I feel like I brought this up last time, this issue of cognitive differences and how we perceive things is never really addressed with the severity that it has.
Yeah, you did bring up the brain difference last week, and earlier today in this conversation, we went through a little bit of what I showed you last week of how to present the document in different views with the full intention that should also work in different environments. So if we keep this small, but we have a great presentation of it in different, hopefully leave some VR room open after this, also have our normal journal. But if we make it really, really accessible, from the sense of, somebody curious can actually understand what's going on, that may lead to us having a bigger one next time. So I'm totally happy with not making it massive. Fabian?
Yeah, I always want things to be iterative, and that means not making it big before there is a need for it. It's managing risk. Maybe it's going to suck. Maybe it's going to be terrible. Maybe we're going to hate each other after. Hopefully not. Hopefully it's going to be amazing, and we're going to be disappointed that we didn't bring more people in. But most likely there are going to be so many kinks to fix, so many things to adjust that I would suggest not to. Doesn't mean making it secret. It can still be announced, but I mean, it's in 5 days or less. I imagine a lot of people are not going to be able to come, even if we were to shout it everywhere. So I would say public, inviting everyone, yet it doesn't have to be harassing people, so that hopefully a lot of people who can't make it will be a bit disappointed when they see the amazing results we might show. And then there'll be a next time, and the next time will be better, and there'll be an occasion to bring more people in. Now on communication of the result, I think it has to be as accessible as possible, but not to the point of making it uninteresting. It has to be deep. It has to be something genuinely new. It has to push a bit. It has to push boundaries. So it has still to be understandable, but at least most ideally of the people present, but it doesn't have to be, too simple.
When I said accessible, it's a bad word. It's very loaded with things these days. All I meant is somebody of our kind of interest. It's not just a big block of text or a single recorded video. That's what I mean. That it should be tangibly exciting to go through it in different ways.
So, okay, I agree with all of that. To move forward, we should definitely identify a structure. For example, Andrea has 40 minutes, then there's, 20 minutes of discussion, and Fabian has 40 minutes, and then 20 minutes of discussion. So we should definitely identify that. And then I'd also be interested in the extent to which, aside from that, the time structure, the extent to which we want the content to follow similar structure. I think in small gatherings, I tend to get more out of things when there's some amount of flexibility, but there's also some kind of parallel. Otherwise, everyone comes with some drastically different direction, and it's a bit hard to kind of pull things together or, compare like apples to apples. That's kind of where my initial proposition came, to have everyone have the same paragraph. So how about everyone does their thing for 40 minutes, and then there's a follow-up session where everyone gets the same paragraph and has to run through their system or their proposition or whatever, the same thing, so that to some extent we have something to do an apple-to-apple comparison with.
It makes a lot of sense. I'm still not sure about the paragraph. I think maybe a bigger work could be an option. However, to make this less general, why don't everybody say what they would actually like to do on the day specifically? Maybe starting with you, Andrea, saying, this is what I want to build or test or whatever.
Yes, we're all going to read together a paragraph of Moby Dick, and then I'm going to go into our in-house GR application, and I'm going to build for you, maybe even the whole thing will be live. I don't know, I have to think about it. A spatialized version that's going to be my very specific reading and interpretation of that paragraph in Moby Dick. And we're going to go object by object in that spatialized version of the paragraph and discuss the benefits of spatializing it in that particular way. There you go. So that's what I'm gonna do. We're gonna spatialize Moby Dick.
Okay, Fabian, are you ready to talk about what you think you want to do?
I'm ready to talk about it, but I don't know yet what it is.
That is probably the Frenchest thing you've ever said. How about you, Brandel?
Oh, I don't think that I have anything that I can offer in that kind of period of time. I've been on other stuff. I am going to be doing a talk at work that I'd love to turn into a wider audience kind of thing, pending sort of approvals or sort of a soul searching about the reach of it. It's called "What is a Person Design as an Exercise in Applied Cognitive Science," and so that's going to be a lot to cover, but hopefully a lot of fun for people who are sort of just sort of tweaking the context menus in Apple Mail and notes and things to go like, hold on, what do we know about truth and people and perception, and what does that mean we should do to the background color of this context menu? But yeah, no, I'm afraid I don't know that there's anything meaningful I can offer in terms of a prototype or an artifact at this time.
I'm very excited by that talk because, you know, I met Don Norman a few times, and yeah, good guy, clever guy, but his generation is mostly anecdote, HCI through anecdote, and then, oh, we discovered a thing, right? What you're starting here is a framework for what is a human. It is actually not a trivial question. I was so excited when I saw you mention that. It's really fantastic. But you do have something you can offer to this specific thing. One of the things would be your carpet, your magic carpet. Could we maybe find an input-output for that? Because I would love to provide you with the data from our own work. Maybe even playing around with the color coding, just briefly to show Andrea here. After the stuff that I was working on last week, I've also been looking at putting the themes in a book. You know, hang on. Let's say you're reading a book, and here we have these themes. They're just text. So if I want to read about the internet, I do Command F, and it shows me all the occurrences of internet, right? But what if these themes could also, in the document, appear as color, either when you go through it like this, or maybe interspersed in the overview when you read it. So it would be like, in this one. So these are all AI generated summaries of that bit of speech. But why not? Why plain? Why could it not maybe aestheticized? Because Patrick is all about art aestheticized. Why couldn't that be, for instance, a hue of green, right? And it's a very seductive idea, but of course it's also very problematic using colors. But what Brandel has is an amazing magic carpet that takes a transcript or any form of text and presents it literally as a colorful carpet that could be. Sorry, I could go on for 10 minutes at least on that.
Well, so I could definitely very easily plug that in. So in the same way that you have the author graph being able to be kind of drag and droppable, you could probably make it so that you can load up arbitrary texts in that specific form. But what I did, if you haven't seen it, Andrea, is taking a long video like this one will ultimately be, and based on the visual it's based on the transcript, being able to keep a running tally of the words and the frequency with which they're said. So have words sorted by frequency, but then have a map of them all overlaid in terms of when they occur in the text. And so if there's a particular keyword that pops up later on, then you'll be able to see that it dominated the conversation, then you'll be able to see that there was a lot, but it started late, and the modality is having it all arrayed out in a long sort of physical sort of like long rug of these words, and you have the ability with a controller to lift it up at different parts in order to be able to kind of scrutinize each of those pieces. And then the horizontal position back and forth controls the tightness of that sort of focus curve, that bell curve, to be able to kind of evaluate and identify features of it. And so it's just it's a representation of how you might be able to use sort of multimodal selection and motion, or multidimensional selection and motion as a way to impart additional nuance to the control that you have over a specific view. But we've talked about it far longer than it took to make it, so it's kind of weird. But that's fine.
Yeah, so the key for me with this whole thing is have this community that generates different ideas. Like Andrea said, if someone disagrees, how wonderful is that? That's when we learn. But also to have it recorded in a useful way. But the whole meta of what I do is, of course, visual meta or whatever meta. You know, if we manage to have a demo day where we do cool things, I really hope we can in some way transfer some of the data between us. You know, it doesn't have to be everything, but, you know, even if at the end of it, you know, I do the transcript and I do some of the basic stuff, we can feed it into what was made that day, I think will be really, really nice. You know, the one thing I absolutely loathe is information ghettos like CD-ROMs used to be. You know, it's nice to have one presentation, but right now we need to move stuff around. So, Peter, you've been very quiet. You've had your brunch, but with the environment you've been working or otherwise, would you like to do something specific that day? I think that would be great if you could.
Well, my code's working in the headless mode, where it's like I showed you last week in VS Code, having open one pane with the grammar, another pane showing the sample input, another pane showing the results of parsing it. The trouble is that the notation is going to be absolutely impenetrable to anyone in the audience. Unless they're familiar with parsing expression grammars, it will be absolutely meaningless, and I might as well be showing them Etruscan. I'm struggling now to get a graphical front end to talk to that back end, but I'm not there yet. So I think I might have to just be in spectator mode Friday.
Well, if that changes, it changes.
Yeah, because I mean, otherwise I'm going to be showing you parsing expression grammar code that will be utterly meaningless to everyone. I'm also toying with the idea of maybe writing a transpiler from a natural language equivalent to the PEG syntax, so that it would be closer to a English reading of what the unreadable notation is actually doing. But that would be a few weeks away at best.
Okay, so we had this rule of no slides and no general talk, but I'm wondering now if we should throw that out of the window in a very specific manner and have, you know, very specific, what are we making? This is what I'm going to make, making time, but then also have Alan and maybe me come in and talk about almost random shit, to say it in a funny way, just to throw everybody off. That can then maybe help for the next session, but not for a slide going through presentation on already known stuff, but to ask provocative questions maybe.
This is on the 12th. I have to see if I can even be there.
Fabienne, are you doing a high five or do you have something to say?
No i5, no. I really don't think slides are a good idea because we go back to what we tend to do, so the safety zone. And I also wanted to highlight to both Brendel and Peter that if you don't have the time to prepare something for it, that's perfect. There is no need to prepare anything. And in fact, for Peter, especially if you say, oh, that thing, whatever that is a couple of weeks away from it, that's perfect in the sense that I'm ready to bet, overthinking it, because the core of the idea is probably a lot less work than all the edge cases that are still important, but are not, again, the core of the idea, that are not what is going to allow you to think further and think if it is indeed worth a couple of weeks to actually implement it. So I would tend to insist a tiny bit both on the no slides or at least no conventional presentation of a description, but rather the thing itself, whatever that thing is and whatever that state is, even if it's broken. And also on the very minimalist aspect to it, like there is no need for something that is idiot-proof, future-proof, whatever, as long as it's something that is genuinely new, even if it's not genuinely new in general, but at least to you, and it helps you think further, I think it's worthwhile to explore. And the process itself, again, is valuable. But if you think in depth about how perfect it must be, then yeah, you will need much more time than you'll have available until then, and even right there and then.
Yeah, fair point. Andrea.
I second Fabian in no slides.
Oh, sorry, I agree with no slides. I'm just saying that maybe there could be some moments of interjection, not pre-thought stuff. Sorry.
Oh yeah, as long as there. So what I am against is the slide with words on it or pictures as a mode of communicating ideas. So if you just talk or sing or dance, that's fine. And basically, also, it just occurred to me, I would be okay going a bit later on Friday, although I know that might not work with other people in Europe. If we could include Bob Horn. So Bob and I do have like regular calls in which we try to find new ways of communicating ideas. And I think what Bob and I have in common is a belief that people are really actually stuck because of text and words. So people rely too much rather than too little on text and words. And I have like space and architecture because of my background. He has his drawings, this like cartoon kind of stuff he's working on. And last time we called, which was last week, we both experimented with what's the right word? Switching cognitive operations into dance movements, into actually moving your body. So rather than in the most systematic intellectual way, I'm not talking about like kind of like, you know, whatever 60s, 70s kind of stuff. So so I've been doing a lot of reading on this, and it's basically the idea that when you think and you're looking for association or the metadata, what other meaning does this have, or what some kind of, okay, you do what we do here a lot, we just highlight a word and then some kind of AI is searching Wikipedia or some other stuff to make a summary or to find other things it might be related to, and that's how maybe you come up with some idea or you build an argument. Rather than doing that, the idea was that we're gonna focus on a problem in one of the projects we're working on, and on 2 or 3 elements of that problem which we're not able to reconcile, for which we cannot find a satisfactory solution. And then we're going to use our hands and our bodies to move and place those 2 or 3 elements into a spatial relationship to each other, and then use our body to play around with reconfiguring the spatial relationship between those 2 or 3 elements. And actually, Bob stood up and he took his cane and he started to like stretch and move around. He had to step outside the camera, so I couldn't actually see, but I could hear like, oh, he's trying to like do all sorts of moves. And then we had an hour discussion about what we came up with. And we both came up with a very valid answer to the very specific question that we had posed. And in both those answers we came up with, there was a very beautiful embedded new type of relationship that came to our awareness through that spatialized relationship between those 2 concepts. And we would have never come up with that had we not literally spatialized those concepts. And, you know, we just use the bodies because that's why we have that. It's easier than VR. So in a way, using the body is like taking a shortcut and using space because, you know, it's the tool we have. Okay, so this was a long parenthesis to say that I'm completely okay with anyone intervening and adding any kind of opinion or perspective, as long as it is not text or letters or pictures on a slide, as long as it's in another type of format. And this is not because we want to move away from text or because we're not interested in text, is because it's showing a different perspective on the very operations we expect text to achieve for us, that I think can revitalize the conversation about what text is and what text does, which I do think tends to run in a rut sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm totally on board with no slides. I also think that it's an important characteristic of demo-ness in terms of the presentation of a live thing for scrutiny and manipulation and potentially failure as well. Whereas slideness is something that serves the purpose of being sort of substantially more prepared and curated in a way that has much greater expectations about the function and flow. And so I think sort of simply from the basis of having people sort of fly by the seat of their pants somewhat, it's important to be able to make sure that people have a ceiling to the amount of preparedness that they come into such a sort of an arena with. So that makes sense too. But that sounds really fun and really fascinating. It reminds me of there's an app or a service called Textio, and right now it seems to simply be for doing sensitivity reading over resumes and job descriptions. But the initial kind of launch video for it was a person moving their body around in order to manipulate text in a way that was kind of somewhere a lot more towards that the 60s and 70s interpretive dance, but with some sort of post-produced overlays over top of dancers' movements to indicate what kinds of things they might be doing. But it was really evocative of what we might be able to do as a consequence of being able to sort of relate to documents with our entire body.
Okay, I think we have talked around things, and I think that was productive. So what should we put down on paper? Because even though we're only inviting people in our own community, we do agree on that, right? That it's okay to email our own community?
Yes.
Or should we keep it smaller, or what's the thinking?
No, I think that's totally reasonable. I mean, I don't think it needs to be secret. It's just that it, like the question of how much it needs to be kind of repped externally, and I think like it could even be mentioned publicly, but it's just not that the expectation is to drum up as much sort of viewership as possible in the moment.
Right. So are we going to give a paragraph or something ahead of time to people to prep for, like a Moby Dick piece or something?
I would be okay leaving that open. I know some people have strong feelings against Moby Dick.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, all kinds of feelings, I guess. So we have 20 minutes. We got to nail this. So let's start with the timing, just to get an overview, shall we maybe? So we start with a half an hour just gathering ourselves, right? Is this going to be in VR? Is that the plan? That this whole thing or part is in headset or?
No, I think most of it should be on Zoom. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll do, if you're okay with it, Fabian, why don't we do Zoom? But, you know, when we put our headset on, wherever we go, we leave the audio at least from Zoom, right? So we're still connected without multi-experiences and all of that. Is that okay?
So yes, it's okay. What I had in mind though is I mean, Zoom can be always on the whole day, but it doesn't have to, in the sense that there are moments where we're supposed to gather and then showcase whatever we did. And the in-between is the moment where we build, but it doesn't mean we have to do it alone. But what I had at least initially in mind is the in-between moments. Microphone can be on, Zoom can be on, but it doesn't have to. I mean, for some people, they need like complete silence, or they need the loudest, crappiest music for everybody else. So that's what I had in mind. It can be on for people who do want.
So just before we go further into this, first of all, Alan, can you be there on Friday? Super early on Friday, or part of it?
I can try and be there, but I can't, as a spectator, I can't promise that I will be there at this moment.
Okay. Now, you guys, the two of you who are building, you're building something specifically in VR. With
Yes.
what I'm currently focusing on, how could I contribute to what you're doing? Anything specific, or should I focus more on presenting the record of the day?
I think, well, okay, what comes to mind, I don't know if useful for demo day or not. I would be interested in general in learning more about how you make assumptions or how you decide on what is important for hypertext. The content and the structure, like your entire approach to that.
Yeah, I mean, either then or another day, we can have relatively structured interviews amongst ourselves. That would be okay. Brandel, I skipped over you there because you initially said you didn't have anything to present, but do you want to present your magic carpet?
Yeah, no, I can definitely do that. I was just looking at the entirety of the code is like 250 lines, and about 160 of it is my standard boilerplate. So whatever, it's very minimal in terms of being able to kind of drop in other things and manipulate those independently. So yeah, no, it's probably worth raising as a thing, even if it's not stunning or particularly conceptually coherent. It's an interesting starting and reference point. So sure.
Cool. You also have this.
Oh, the map. Yep. Yeah. I think that's really more yours than it is mine. I don't mean to sort of to distance myself from it, but it's all it is on my side is a VR visualization of the capabilities that come from having a linked document like this.
Would not the Alice in Wonderland down the rabbit hole be appropriate for this conversation?
What?
Oh, but it's not VR. I was thinking the Brandel's demo of the scroll and perspective
Yeah.
is interesting conceptually because it's not just a navigational device. It has gesture as input, and it has a kind of a semantic meaning in how even the words are not just flat anymore. They have a three-dimensional quality, and so it's kind of an early language.
Yeah, no, that is reasonable, and also I don't know if I've showed everybody, but I pulled all of understanding media into VR, McLuhan, so that you look at it paragraph by paragraph in this kind of star field, so you can see
Oh,
what
yeah,
else
I've
that
seen
could
that.
like then like I mean, I can talk about that. I just haven't built anything for this, is what I mean. So yeah, if I'm allowed to use stuff that I've done before, I've got a bunch, and I can kind of think about what's most appropriate. But there's very little new to see.
I have a suggestion. How about we actually ask a question? So I don't know, something like what's the spatial dimension of text, or what is spatial hypertext, something like that. Because I think even when, and then each of us gives a short presentation, whether it's in VR or code or not, about that. I think each of us have something to say about that. So where the keyword is spatial, but of course, text is spatial, even if it's not immersive space, even if it's not embodied space, even the page has a certain spatial characteristics. So I think that would be quite interesting to me.
Yeah, I can definitely get behind that as the sort of a focus and question that people are in the business of answering fundamentally.
Would it be considered slides or cheating or something if I presented a game that's on my phone that I use as a tool for thought? And for me, it actually is a kind of a hypertext, even though there's no words involved. It's literally just a planar graph that you have to solve. Would that be of interest? Would that be breaking the rules?
That sounds great.
Yeah, that sounds in bounds from my interpretation. I don't make the rules, but that sounds reasonable. I mean, one thing that I'm conscious of in the context of demo day is that it's inevitably biased toward people who have the ability to code, and not that that's not an important and special thing, but a prototype can be a paper prototype as well. So as long as what you're showing is a prototype itself rather than slides about, then I don't know how other people feel about this, but I would consider like a prototype in whatever form the prototype is, rather than a presentation about it, to be fair game. What is that?
Okay, well, I can present that. I'm actually, as we're speaking, trying to code it in Python right now, but I'm coming up with some problems with the with a particular network X layout. But yeah, if I can't figure this out and play the game, then I could present that.
Yeah, no, cool. Yeah, I mean, as you've probably seen, I know, yeah, I sent you the video as well, Andrea. Like, I've been playing with what do prototypes prototype, and I think that paper and other tangible sort of things have an enormous role, and a bigger role even than many people understand today, to play in improving our understanding of what software is, rather than merely sort of anticipating the functionality of it. So that's awesome.
So what I'm scared of is, Vint has said to me many times, oh, VR is not interesting. It's just, a big monitor, which is of course nonsense. But the thing is, we still have a lot of stuff to solve in 2D. Of course we do. And I don't want to take our ignorance from that into VR unchallenged. So that's why I'm very eager to the things like our rolling thing here with this stuff. I really think this addresses a spatial issue, and until I can actually see this in a virtual environment, like for the sake of simplicity argument, your systems understood that this is the first sentence, this is the last one, these are bullet points, and this, understood the structure. And then we can start in a virtual environment to see, okay, to get an overview, are we going to do the color stuff? Or by overview, I don't mean just a plain overview, I also mean analysis based on content, right? I'm very, very eager to somehow look at this. The spatial dimension of text, I would think would be interesting to also look at from 2D into 3D and back again, so to speak. I mean, I would love it, of course, Brandel, for example, if some of this could be put in the dynamic view thing that we have in VR space. But but how the thing I really like about soft space is the interactions are really fast. You move your hand and the thing follows, which is so important. Doug Engelbart's idea of a skier. If you ski downhill and it's not instant, you move your leg, you fall over. Same thing here. Sticks. So if we could find ways to really interact with this kind of a large scale of data, I mean, hang on, the interface is in the way. I mean, this is 40,000 words just for our overview document. What do we show?
Yeah.
If anything. But back to the specifics. Do we agree on this paragraph? I'll make it a bit bigger, actually. There we go.
Yes.
Do I have approval for this paragraph?
Yep.
Okay.
I mean, if I may just, the motivation, at least for me, is to invite people to take action, whatever the medium might be, whatever the process might be. But I'm convinced that all of us, literally all of us, have ideas at the back of our minds that are taking up so much, that creates stress basically, and that we think either we can't do it because of technical limitations, our own knowledge, whatever. And that's what I think must be constantly challenged. And every tiniest steps toward that helps. Again, it doesn't even matter if there is something working at the end, as long as it gives the tiny bit of either confidence or even knowledge, or that others are struggling and we might help each other. That tiny bit of empowerment or extra agency, to me, that's the fundamental aspect to it. And yes, ideally, there is something coming out of it, something tangible, something we can share to others. But as long as we get like that tiny little boost of just attempting, I think that's extremely valuable. So the rules are just there, in my opinion, for this to kind of put forward the capacity we all have to do something, build something, regardless of the medium or even is it VR or not, text or not, all that might be precious to us. But I think the big picture is like a tiny little push to try to do something, to build something. I think that's the most valuable. And I'm rather convinced that by trying to do it together, we can learn from each other, motivate each other, have so much more capacity to do. That's the hope.
That emoji keyboard. It's so detestable.
What's that?
The linear list of the linear unfilterable list of emoji. It's something I don't like because there are too many. But it's yeah.
It's like having an embedding of a telegraph inside of a keyboard.
Yeah, or picking a phone number from a drop down of all of the phone numbers.
That's a good one. Right. So Okay, first of all, we should feel free to email each other before the day. If there's any email addresses missing, email me and I'll make sure I reply all of you. So let's get the second paragraph. Yeah, the whole waste of time thing is interesting because if it turns out that everything we built is absolute rubbish, that's extremely valuable to go forward. You know, otherwise it's not an experiment. Should we have an open time, maybe Wednesday, let's say half an hour on our normal time slot in case somebody wants to ask some questions before the day to see if they're even interested? Or should we just dive right in? I don't know.
Dive right in. It's going to have lots of problems. That's okay. We're not going to fix them all, but hopefully if we do write down things a bit or keep some traces, then the next one will be better.
Is this you're drafting an email?
Yes.
It might be good to include some of what they plan to see for people who are just, you know, coming in, right? Like that's I guess that's an email invite to participate.
What do you mean specifically? Sorry, I just needed that obvious bit in there.
I was thinking like if it's an email to say like, hey, come sit in and watch, then maybe some list of or kind of an agenda, like this will be happening for 10 minutes, this will be happening for 5 minutes.
Oh, this bit. In more
Oh.
detail. Yeah, we can do that.
I guess the presentations is what I was referring to, but of course not presentations, unpresentations.
And it's yeah, I think just that is enough, really. You know, who of the community is already going to be there? It'll be.
As a quick aside, while you're typing away, I'm curious about in the VR sense. I found the perfect tool. I can't wait to get a wonderfully paying job to buy little toys like this again. But or make one. It's a foot pedal that Elgato has. Basically, you press the foot pedal and you can run some functions, or you can open an app or something like that. And streamers and video game folks play with it. I think it could actually be replicated pretty easily with just an iPhone and an NFC, where it's spring loaded. But I was thinking about that and everyday usage of the screens, but also having a foot pedal while you're using VR could be pretty cool. Sort of that embodied, getting a little bit closer to that embodied action. I don't know if there's anything going on in that realm. It just seems pretty obvious.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Those are the things to look into. It's 6. I have to take care of other responsibilities, I'm afraid, despite this being really interesting and important. What else do we need for this email? I'll do something, so I'll be there. I'll pop it in an email. Yeah, sorry, go on.
Maybe we clean up a little bit the question in bold.
Okay.
The one, what's the spatial dimension of text? Maybe it is just that.
We need to highlight its VR maybe.
Well,
we?
so, in my opinion, we can make it as tight as possible, but it's not a quiz, it's not a test, it's an invitation to build. So we sound very maybe strict and with the rules and all that, but yeah, the goal is for people to be excited and happy and learn while building something. So that's the prompt is for this.
Flowchart does need an R. The spell check was saying before, but I wasn't sure
Where-
if it was going right. So in this
Oh, right.
I
jump.
wasn't sure if it was
I-
it was going straight away. But and fantasize is just US versus versus British spelling, so it's not an issue. But
But-
yeah, I think space, inviting people to consider space is reasonable to say in immersive space rather than in VR, because like you know, if you had projective stuff, I don't know whether people call that VR. So there, I think immersive actually tells a lot and invites people to think about things like multi-device things. You know, I heard Fuchsia, the Google OS, was initially devised as something to be able to kind of be pan device and multiply spatial, and that got nerfed. But there are lots of ways of thinking about immersiveness. So I feel like that personally, I feel like that's the more powerful sort of operative word.
Immersive, so just leaving it like this.
Yeah.
Not to, I mean, this is great. I don't want to change any of the wording, but there's the spatial dimensions, but I'm also interested in the shape of discussions or the shape of content or the morphology of ideas and associations, and that requires a spatial dimension, but it's not so much interested in text. Andreas, Andrea, to your point earlier about text being one language that we have access to, and it's the easiest to hold on to. So it's the one that's been developed the most, but we have other languages that we can use. Anyway.
Yeah, but I think this is short enough for now, but I'm adding here and others as active spectators.
Right.
You know, because, yeah. All right, can we send this? And Alan, your interest there is of course very relevant, but for this, we just leave it as this, right?
Yep. Very good.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, nobody dissenting. Are we an effective team?
Right.
That's going to take another email.
Well done.
Oh, come on, that's one of the best movies of all time.
What is that, Sneakers?
No, Are We an Effective Team? It was, what's it called? Is that really nice Tom Cruise one where he's stuck on this cloud little base and sci-fi and...
Oh, with the tech. Yeah, I know the one.
I gotta go, but we gotta look this up. If you have not seen it, you should. It's just such a great...
Groundhog Day?
Aristophanes, The Clouds?
No.
Groundhog Day.
Oblivion!
Oblivion.
Oblivion! All right, I leave you with the link to Oblivion in the chat. And love you all. Look forward to Friday. And if anything. Okay, bye. Thanks for today.
You then take care.
Bye.